This is CBC Vancouver News.
Damage was very severe. Like the north side of a whole plaza wall was all, came down.
An early morning fire has left some Coquitlam business owners picking up the pieces. Now an investigation is underway into what may have caused it, including a possible explosion. Also,
a lot of people misunderstand what we're doing at the overdose protection site.
A group of doctors and advocates are setting up overdose prevention clinics across BC with a big message for the province. More are urgently needed. Plus,
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear.
Remembering former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, his career, achievements, and long-lasting legacy. Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. A plaza complex in Coquitlam has been left in shambles after an early morning fire. Now RCMP and fire crews are investigating what may have caused it and a possible explosion. Michelle Morton reports.
Police and firefighters were called to a strip mall on North Road at Lougheed Highway around 6:30 Sunday morning for a reported fire. A spokesperson for the fire department says when crews arrived, the fire alarms were ringing, there was thick black smoke, and glass was spread throughout the parking lot, indicating a possible explosion. Images from the scene show part of the plaza destroyed, with awnings and signs on the ground, as well as exposed twisted metal and wooden framing.
The damage was very severe. Like the north side of a whole plaza wall was all, came down, right? So I thought it was a bigger damage than I thought. Secondly, I feel very lucky that no one is at that time at the spot, so nobody got hurt.
The mall, which is near the Lougheed SkyTrain station, also houses multiple businesses.
They say that, we all talk about what's gonna be happening in the future, and some of those business owner has a second location. They're okay, but most of them only had that location.
RCMP say there have been no reported injuries or victims and are asking witnesses and anyone with information to contact them. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Police in Surrey say 2 people were injured in an overnight shooting outside a pub. It happened in Surrey's Newton neighborhood around 2:30 in the morning. Police say they received multiple calls about a large fight involving several people outside a pub near 85th Avenue and 132nd Street. 2 men were shot and taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Investigators say 2 suspects, described as South Asian, were seen leaving the scene in a dark-colored sedan. Anyone with information or video of the incident is being urged to contact Surrey Police or Crime Stoppers. Hundreds of people living in 2 small West Kootenay communities fear they will be stranded with an ongoing ferry strike set to expand. A ruling from the BC Labour Relations Board on Friday means cable ferries connecting remote communities to the mainland can run on a reduced schedule as of tomorrow. It comes as job action from workers on the Kootenay Lake Ferry escalates. One local resident says the reduction in service is detrimental.
You're potentially delaying people 2-3 hours in the middle of winter. People potentially are going to lose their jobs over this because they can't be at work.
The Harrop and Glade cable ferries will run 8 and 16 round trips each day instead of all day on demand. The Labour Relations Board says the ruling serves as a middle ground between the union and the employer, Western Marine Pacific. Sailings for essential services like medical appointments, classes, and emergency vehicles will still run on demand. Ferry workers walked off the job in early November. A group of doctors in BC are once again calling on the province to consider its policy on overdose prevention clinics. They say with rising toxic drug deaths, there is an urgent need for intervention. Saurabh Sandhu has more.
This overdose prevention pop-up clinic in Nanaimo is one of many planned across BC. People can come to use their medications in a place where there are trained people to respond if a toxic drug poisoning or overdose were to occur.
In November, a similar attempt by doctors to set up an overdose prevention site at Nanaimo Regional Hospital was shut down by Island Health Authority, forcing volunteers to move their operations across the street. Wanda LeBlanc's son has been a drug user for 5 years. She says he wouldn't be alive right now if it wasn't for overdose prevention sites.
We're not giving people drugs, we're testing people's drugs and allowing them to use when they're here in a safe place.
Last month, CBC News learned Island Health had planned to open overdose prevention centers at 3 Vancouver Island hospitals, with one site to be implemented in the summer of 2024. But those never materialized because of concerns about illicit drug use in hospital spaces.
We are not here to argue whether or not drug use is right or morally acceptable. We are here as physicians acknowledging the reality that drug use happens. And right now we are in the biggest public health crisis that Canada and British Columbia has ever seen.
As of this October, the BC Coroner's Service says more than 1,900 unregulated drug deaths were reported in the province in 2024. In a statement, the Ministry of Health says it supports overdose prevention services, but the toxic drug crisis looks different in different communities, and how they deliver services has to be different too. Wilder says it's critical the province takes input from the healthcare professionals before shaping policy.
We are absolutely calling on our Minister of Health, Josie Osborne, to connect with us, to invite us to the table as the medical experts so that politicians have the information and the objective data that they need to be able to make rational and reasonable decisions.
Wilder says her group is planning 20 more clinics coast to coast, after hearing from advocates from across Canada that a service like this is needed. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
Canada's men's 4x100 meter relay team has been named Team of the Year by the Canadian Press after winning gold this summer at the Paris Olympics. The team included Andre DeGrasse, Aaron Brown, Brendan Rodney, and Kelowna's own Jerome Blake.
We've achieved a lot of cool things together, winning medals and, Canadian records and stuff like that. So for us, this is the next thing that goes onto that. I call it my little mantle of things. And, that's it's a really cool thing. And just to be able to do something like this, again, so significant with my brothers, it's a really cool thing.
The quartet has won many medals together, including silver at the 2021 Tokyo Olympics and gold at a 2022 World Championship in Oregon. They now go on to compete in the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. How energy efficient is your home? There are plenty of tools to measure just that. And now libraries around Victoria are lending out take-home thermal imaging kits so people can add a little insulation and maybe take a little off their heating bill. Take a look.
My name is Nikki Elliott and I manage the climate action programs at the Capital Regional District. Recently we partnered with the local libraries to launch our thermal imaging cameras. These are designed to help folks look around their homes, and it visually shows where there may be heat loss or cooling loss for in the summer and where there's attention that needs to be had, whether that weather stripping or whether that be more insulation or getting some additional support from our retrofit community. On the screen you see a visual difference in colors against the temperature difference. So if your home, for example, in the winter is being heated and there's some cracks, let's say, in the insulation, you'll see a different color show up specifically in that spot. So the kits come with functionality in which you can take a picture of what you're seeing, you can upload that, email that to yourself. Typically you'll see certainly around windows, our typical area, but we also see around doors, gaps in insulation such as around your roof line. Often there'll be spots around lighting outlets, for example, where there may be some missing insulation in there as well. They're really designed to be fun and to help identify some easy ways that folks can do retrofits in their homes, and also link to broader programs such as our Home Energy Navigator program to do more intensive retrofits and supporting people at home. Certainly, the CRD is interested in supporting our residents and advancing climate action at home and in the community. Buildings, in particular, relate to a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, and so learning about energy, learning about emissions, and helping to advance projects that will reduce those in the region is important to us.
Jimmy Carter, former U.S. President, Nobel Peace Prize winner, and humanitarian, has died at the age of 100. We'll have more on his life and legacy after this. Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter has died. He had celebrated his 100th birthday this past October. Carter left office in 1981, but his career in public life lasted long after that. The CBC's Lindsay Duncombe reports.
In Jimmy Carter, the United States elected an outsider, plain-spoken, humble, religious.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear.
The promise of his presidency a contrast to the scandal of the Nixon White House.
Let us create together a new national spirit of unity and trust.
Carter grew up on a peanut farm in rural Georgia. He served in the Navy before returning home to expand the family business. A Southern Democrat, as governor, he promoted civil rights and education. Carter aimed to achieve a competent and compassionate government, but his achievements were often overshadowed by a world in turmoil and a suffering economy. Carter embraced the role of peacemaker and focused his attention on the Middle East. The deal between Israel and Egypt, known as the Camp David Accords, solidified Carter's reputation as a statesman. It led to a Nobel Peace Prize. But it was the conflict with Iran that many say defined his presidency. In 1979, Islamic extremists overthrew the American-backed Shah. Iranian students took over the U.S. Embassy. 52 Americans were held hostage for more than a year. Carter ordered a high-risk rescue. It failed. 8 American servicemen were killed in a helicopter crash. The conflict with Iran led to a gas shortage, long lines and panic at the pump when Americans could least afford it. Inflation soared while wages stagnated.
It is a crisis of confidence.
In what's known as his malaise speech in 1979, Carter urged Americans to reduce consumption. He criticized self-indulgence and consumerism. It didn't go over well, especially in contrast to the telegenic Hollywood optimism of the man campaigning for Carter's job. Ronald Reagan would defeat Carter in 1980. Unpopular and just 56, Carter at first struggled with the adjustment to post-presidential life. But in the decades that followed, his public service would outshine his presidency. In 1982, he opened the Carter Center, devoted to peace and human rights. He and his wife Rosalind helped build homes all over the world through Habitat for Humanity. He authored dozens of books, including a fly fishing guide and a novel. His 2006 book, which compared Israeli actions in Gaza and the West Bank with South African apartheid, drew sharp criticism from fellow Democrats. He spoke to CBC about the controversy.
The word apartheid is provocative, but I don't look on the word provocative as negative.
In 2015, a devastating diagnosis. Carter had metastatic melanoma spread to his brain. A new drug regime put him in remission, and Carter continued to work into his 90s, traveling, building, preaching, living up to the title of his autobiography, A Good Life. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
Investigators in South Korea have been combing the charred and mangled wreckage of the air crash that has stunned the world. Landing gear failed to deploy. There were only 2 survivors. The CBC's Ithel Musso reports.
The airliner skidded off the runway on its belly, completely out of control, headed for a concrete wall and a fiery explosion. 179 people are dead. The only survivors, 2 cabin crew pulled from the burning wreckage. Family members wept at the airport as officials announced the names of victims, some identified only by their fingerprints. She was almost home, says this grief-stricken father. His daughter was returning from a holiday trip to Thailand with friends. After a public apology, the airline CEO promised to investigate the cause. Jeju Air will make every effort to resolve the situation quickly, he said. The plane was a Boeing 737-800, flown by airlines around the world, including in Canada. There were no maintenance issues flagged, but officials say the landing gear did not deploy properly.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday 세 번 선언했고요.
They also say a pilot told air traffic control the plane had suffered a bird strike before issuing a mayday call and crashing into a concrete barrier. One expert wonders why it was there in the first place.
I would say that absolutely contravenes international standards to have that wall there. No question about it. It should never have a wall anywhere near the runway. Nowhere near it.
The crash, one of South Korea's worst aviation disasters, comes amid a political crisis, including the impeachment of 2 presidents. There are many government organizations that are vacant at the moment, says this man. This leads to uncertainty about whether the government can effectively perform its duties and respond to the accident. Ithel Musso, CBC News, Toronto.
The president of Azerbaijan is blaming Russia for the Christmas Day plane crash that killed 38 people. He acknowledges the plane may have been shot down accidentally, but as Yasmin Khanea explains, he's accusing Moscow of trying to cover it up.
Sorrow in Azerbaijan's capital as two pilots and a flight attendant killed in the Azerbaijan Airlines crash were laid to rest Sunday. They were honored for how they landed the airliner, allowing 29 people to survive the fiery crash. A crash that Azerbaijan's president now says was Russia's fault. We can say with complete clarity that the plane was shot down by Russia, he told Azerbaijani state television Sunday. We are not saying that it was done intentionally, but it was done. The Christmas Day crash killed 38 people and injured 29 others. The flight was en route from Azerbaijan's capital to Grozny in southern Russia. But it diverted to Kazakhstan, where it burst into flames. The Azerbaijani president alleging the plane was hit by fire from the ground in Russia, accusing its northern neighbor of covering it up. On Saturday, Russian President Vladimir Putin offered a rare apology to Azerbaijan's president over the fact that the crash happened in Russian airspace.
It is out of character. The reason, though, it seems to be is that a lot of people survived the crash. It's much harder to bury the evidence.
But Putin stopped short of admitting Moscow was to blame. The Azerbaijani president says the apology fulfills one of his demands, but he still wants Russia to take full responsibility and to punish the guilty.
It's not clear that he will get everything that he's asking for, but of course, it puts Russia in an uncomfortable diplomatic situation.
As the two countries remain at odds, the families of the victims continue to grieve. Yasmin Khanea, CBC News, Vancouver.
Back in Canada, the Liberal Party's Atlantic caucus is calling on Justin Trudeau to step down. A letter made public today by MP Wayne Long says the decision was reached last Monday. The letter said Trudeau's tenure has built a valuable legacy, a legacy it says could be lost if he leads the party into the next election, and pointing to opposition threats to vote no confidence. It said time was of the essence. Here we have a beautiful live shot of Whistler's Olympic Plaza. I'll have your full forecast coming up next. All right, let's take a look now at our forecast for the week ahead, beginning with a quick look at the temperatures around the province tonight. -16 in Fort St. John, -4 in Kamloops and snowy, 1 in Kelowna with, again, those snowy conditions overnight, and wet on the island in Tofino with a 3 and a 4 in Victoria. Heading into tomorrow, snow is expected for many parts of the province, -15, and snow flurries in Fort St. John, -3 in Prince George, -3 as well in Williams Lake, and in Kelowna, a lot more precipitation mixed in with those snow flurries and a high of 3. Over on the island, wet, wet, and more wet. 7 is your high for tomorrow, Victoria, 8 in Tofino. Here in Metro Vancouver, 8 is also our high for tomorrow. A storm system is expected to roll in on New Year's Eve on the Tuesday. That's going to bring with it a lot of rainy and windy conditions, but that should clear up by Wednesday with a high of 6. Several species of frogs that were nearly wiped out by a deadly fungus are making a comeback. It started when researchers tracked down some survivors. And as Anand Ram shows us, what they've discovered is driving hope for the future.
The millions who visit Yosemite National Park every year may not notice it. Over the falls, the serenity of the woods, but there's a sound missing.
And to me, the lake feels really empty. It's missing something. And that's because I know what used to be there.
These guys, mountain yellow-legged frogs, and old notebooks from the 1900s talk about seeing hundreds of them along lakes and streams. But along came chytrid, a deadly fungal disease that almost wiped them out. Almost.
Let's go, little guy. You're on your own.
But a team of researchers focused on those survivors, finding them to be newly resistant to the fungus. Eventually testing that tolerance by reintroducing them to high up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. After years of study, they found the frogs not just surviving,
they are thriving now in the presence of this pathogen that a generation or 2 generations of frogs previously wiped them out.
A success story considering rigorous study is lacking. Experts estimate chytrid has killed off 90 species and put hundreds of others into decline.
This is a rare study, right? It took a long period of time, so 15, 20 years. So that means a lot of interventions, a lot of collaboration.
And experts say more money is needed to find out exactly what makes these frogs resistant and if this solution can work with other species. For now, it's a sign of hope.
You put the frogs back, you see the bears come back, you see the garter snakes come back, the coyotes come back. It's a pretty remarkable transition, but it takes a long time to see it happen.
Time to bring back a vital ecosystem engineer to one of the most beautiful parks in the world. Anand Ram, CBC News, Toronto.
That is your late news for Sunday, December 29th. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For news anytime, head to our website at cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5:30. Hope you have a great week.